Welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible Study. In this series of Bible studies, we'll be taking a closer look at the Bible's evidence for the completion of the prolonged Judgment Day and the end of the world occurring in the year 2033. And now here's your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann.
Hello and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible Study in the book of Jonah. This is Jonah chapter 1, study number 27, and it's part of our series in the biblical evidence for the end in the year 2033. And I'm going to begin reading in Jonah 1 verse 4. But Jehovah sent out a great wind into the sea. There was a mighty tempest in the sea, so that the ship was like to be broken. Then the mariners were afraid, and cried every man unto his God, and cast forth the wares that were in the ship into the sea, to lighten it of them. But Jonah was gone down into the sides of the ship, and he lay and was fast asleep. So the shipmaster came to him, and said unto him, What meanest thou, O sleeper? Arise, call upon thy God, if so be that God will think upon us, that we perish not. And I'll stop reading there. Okay, if you were with us in the last study, we discussed in verse 5, Jonah was gone down into the sides of the ship, and we saw how gone down, and also the word sides were both found in Ezekiel 32 in a context that discussed going down to hell, or to the grave and death. And in addition, we saw that the word lay, he was gone down into the sides of the ship and he lay. That is a word translated slept, used again and again of kings. Once they died, it would say, as it does in 1 Kings 11:43, Solomon slept with his fathers. And of course, that idea of sleeping identifies with death. The king had died, and now he went to be with his fathers. So again, gone down into sides points to death in Ezekiel 32. The word lay repeatedly points to death, and was fast asleep. And we went over to Judges 4:21 with Sisera, and it said there that he was fast asleep and weary, and he died. That's when Jael took the nail of the tent, the stake, and hammered it into his temple, and he died. But God associated being fast asleep with the fact that he died. And actually, the Hebrew word translated fast asleep is also translated dead sleep in Psalm 76, verse 6. Well, I think God's trying to make a point here. And it's another portrait in the portrait gallery that Jonah chapter 1 certainly has been. Painting God is the artist painting the picture of the atonement, Christ's death. One more time, going down into the ship. And I pointed out how the ship represents national Israel. And that's where Christ died. Yes, he suffered and died, went to the grave. His body was laid in the tomb. But he began suffering in the Garden of Gethsemane. And the Garden of Gethsemane is in Israel. He was crucified on the cross outside the city Jerusalem, and the city Jerusalem is in Israel. So the ship here typifies Israel, the outward corporate representative of God's kingdom on the earth in their time period. And that's where Christ died. So going down into the sides of the ship, down into death in the nation of Israel, and there to sleep the sleep of death and to be fast asleep, again, tied to death. Well, then we went to the New Testament, and that's where I'm going to go now, over in Matthew chapter 8. And I just mentioned it was towards the end of the study, but I mentioned that we would get more into looking at the very curious account of the Lord Jesus also entering into a ship, and the ship is at sea. It's the Sea of Galilee, and they're crossing over, and a storm arises, which the mariners, this time the mariners are the disciples, the mariners will perish. And so we read in Matthew chapter 8, it says in verse 23, and when he was entered into a ship, his disciples followed him, and behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea. And I mentioned also last time the word tempest, the Greek word, is translated earthquake. It's the same word from Revelation 11:13. There was a great earthquake. Let me read that. Let's to read the whole verse. It says, Revelation 11, verse 13, and the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. So, great earthquake, great tempest. Here in Matthew 8:24, and the word tempest, the Greek word, earthquake, great earthquake. Well, why? What does that identify with? When we read of a great earthquake in the Bible, it normally identifies with judgment. In Revelation 11, judgment on the world. Other places, it would identify with judgment. That's the consistent thing. And here, as Christ has gone into the ship, the fact that there arose a great earthquake or tempest in the sea identifies with judgment. And the sea, the water of the Sea of Galilee, is picturing the wrath of God. And bodies of water like the Red Sea, the Jordan River, and the Jordan River flows into the Sea of Galilee. So the water of the Sea of Galilee also represents God's wrath. Behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. And I think I mentioned this before, but the waves, the waves of the sea, especially a stormy sea, they tie into false prophets. False prophets. We read in Jude 11, I'll start there. It says, woe unto them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Korah. These are spots in your feast of charity, when they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear. Clouds they are without water, carried about of winds, trees whose fruit withereth, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots, raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame, wandering stars to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. So those that have gone in the way of Cain and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward. And if you take a look at 2 Peter 2, similar language, and it's identifying false prophets who bring false gospels. And in Israel, at the time of Christ's coming, the leaders of Israel, and to be a prophet, we're accustomed to Isaiah the prophet, Jeremiah the prophet, but spiritually, the people of God are all prophets, and therefore, those who claim to be the people of God, but are not in truth the people of God, they're unsaved in heart. They have a profession. They might be physical children of Abraham, as the Jews were, and they thought they were the people of God. But in order to be the true people of God, you need a new heart and a new spirit. And as we know, many in Israel were not saved, which is why they did not recognize Christ as Jehovah God in the flesh. They did not recognize him as the Messiah. They had been saying they were waiting for the Messiah for hundreds and hundreds of years. Finally, he comes, and they cannot see him. They cannot perceive that Jesus is the Messiah, the long-awaited Messiah that they would have told you, oh, we can't wait. We're waiting on the Lord to send the Messiah. Just like the church today. They give lip service to the idea of Christ's second coming. Oh, Lord Jesus, come quickly, come quickly. But in actuality, the church today does not want him to come. Can you say that? Because he's already come. He came to judge them, the churches and congregations of the world, officially in 1994. And the Bible's revealed the judgment of Christ, the coming of Christ, the second coming of Christ, to judge the world on May 21, 2011. And those in the churches, they didn't embrace the scriptures. They didn't even bother to check them out, to search these things to see if they were so. They just immediately, casually rejected it. No man knows a day or hour, and that's it, with a wave of the hand. See, they're just like Israel of old. When Christ was born of the Virgin Mary, what do we read in Matthew 2? That Herod was troubled. Remember that? And it says, since we're here in Matthew, let's go back to Matthew 2. This is shocking. It says in Matthew 2, Jesus, we read of his birth in chapter 1, then in verse 1, chapter 2. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled. Well, no wonder, he's an evil man. He typifies Satan. Obviously, he's troubled. But let's read the next part. Matthew 2, verse 3. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. All Jerusalem was troubled at the news of the Messiah's birth, the one born King of the Jews. And that's the reaction of the churches and congregations to the second coming of Christ. It troubles them. They give lip service. Lip service means, they'll tell you all day long of their desire for Christ to come. But when God makes it real, when the Lord brings forth from his word information concerning the time and judgment of Christ's second coming, no, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. You're a date setter. No man knows the day or hour. Well, they're not just in that. They're not right in that. It's a knee-jerk reaction to dismiss it. They don't want to check the Bible out. They don't want him to come. Why wouldn't the church want their Lord and Savior to come to complete things for this world, to bring them the completion of their salvation with the resurrection of their bodies? It's all glory, it's all joy, and just tremendous blessings forevermore once he comes, because they're not truly saved. They're Christian in name only. They call themselves by the name of Christ, but their hearts are far from him. Really, their love is the world. They're completely wrapped up with the world, and they want to be a Christian in the world, but they want the world. They want the world, and if Christ comes, that's the end of the world. And so they have the reaction exactly as the unregenerate out there in the nations, the unsaved. They don't want Christ to come. No, we don't want to hear that. We want to enjoy the world. Same thing for those in the churches and congregations. Well, going back to Matthew 8, behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. So here's Jesus. He's come to Israel. The ship typifies Israel, back in Jonah 1. And he has come to go to the cross eventually to demonstrate the atonement that he performed at the foundation of the world. And so as the waves of the sea, the false prophets within Israel, cover the ship, the ship's about to be destroyed, and those on board, the people of God, just like the mariners, the men of salt, the disciples will perish if the ship is destroyed. And yet Christ is asleep. He's asleep in the ship. Same spiritual picture that we just saw with Jonah. It's an illustration of his death. You see, the false prophets of Israel, the unsaved religious men, not true men, they, again, just like Christians today, they were instrumental in taking Christ to the cross to bring him to his death. God basically he released his hand of restraint, and according to his permissive will, these men does what comes naturally to unsaved men, and it led to the crucifixion, to the death of Christ. And so the storm at sea is basically detailing the events, and they if you read the gospel accounts, they were bound and determined. Jesus must die. Remember Pilate? He wanted to release him. No, release Barabbas. Well, Barabbas was a thief and a murderer. Shall I not release your king? We have no king but Caesar. They were insistent. He must go to the cross. He must die. And that underlying all that was the determinate counsel of God that Christ go to the cross, because he did have to go to the cross. That's what he had come to do. It's why he entered into the world, was to go to the cross. But we see with the ship covered with the waves, and another place that says it beat into the ship, that this is the force of the activity of the unregenerate religious leaders of Israel at that time that does accomplish the goal of bringing Christ to the cross. And at the cross, Christ dies. So he's asleep. In verse 25, his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. They awoke him, and we read a similar account over in Mark 4, Mark chapter 4. Towards the end of the chapter, I'll start reading in verse 35. And the same day when the even was come, he saith unto them, Let us pass over unto the other side. Now, that's something we're going to have to look at. What is this passing over to the other side? We read this word "other side" in each of the gospel accounts. Well, why don't we look at it now? We'll take a look at it now. For instance, in Luke 8, it says in Luke 8, and this is another parallel gospel account, verse 22. Now it came to pass on a certain day that he went into a ship with his disciples, and he said unto them, Let us go over unto the other side of the lake. And they launched forth, but as they sailed, he fell asleep. And there came down a storm of wind on the lake, and they were filled with water, and were in jeopardy. And they came to him, and awoke him, saying, Master, Master, we perish. Then he arose and rebuked the wind and the raging of the water, and they ceased, and there was a calm. So we see the same thing here in Luke 8. It's again a parallel account, except it says it's a lake rather than the sea, and we would just have to understand that it's speaking of the same body of water that is called the Sea of Galilee. And if you look at it on the map, it kind of looks like a lake. And would qualify to be a lake, but as a body of water, it's also a sea, and so they want to cross the lake, cross the Sea of Galilee, to go over unto the other side of the lake. Well, here we're helped. Here we're helped because we're given a very descriptive word concerning that body of water. Now, after they do cross over, they encounter the man who has legion, that is a legion of devils. And when the devils are cast out, they enter into about 2,000 swine, and then they run down. It must be the body of water they just passed over, because when we read the account, they made to the other side and they immediately encounter this man. For instance, back in Mark, and stay here and keep your finger in Luke, but back in Mark, Mark 4, verse 39, he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And then chapter 5, verse 1, and they came over unto the other side of the sea into the country of the Gadarenes. And he went, and when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. So this man is the man here in Luke 8 that has legion. It says in Luke 8, verse 26, and they arrived at the country of the Gadarenes, which is over against Galilee. And when he went forth to land, there met him out of the city a certain man which had devils long time, and wear no clothes, neither abode in any house but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him, and with a loud voice said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou son, excuse me, thou Son of God Most High? I beseech thee, torment me not. And then in verse 30, and Jesus asked him, saying, What is thy name? And he said, Legion, because many devils were entered into him. And they besought him that he would not command them to go out into the deep. And there was there a herd of many swine feeding on the mountain. And they besought him that he would suffer them to enter into them, and he suffered them. Then went the devils out of the man and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the lake and were choked. All right, so they come out of the ship. They're in the land of the Gadarenes, also called the Gergerenes in one place, and they meet the man with legion, and so as the legion of devils, Christ, of course, recognizes them. You know, Jesus is alive in the spiritual realm. He can see them. He can see them. They can see him. They know who he is. We read in James 2 concerning God, where God says, "Thou believest there is one God, thou doest well. The devils also believe and tremble." And so here, Jesus asked them, what is your name? And he said Legion, because many devils were entered into him, and they besought him, the devils besought him, the Lord Jesus, that he would not command them to go out into the deep. That would be the Sea of Galilee. They had just crossed over. And again, remember, the sea represents the wrath of God. Christ on board the ship, it was asleep, indicating he had died. And it's a picture pointing to the fact he died at the foundation of the world, the Lamb slain from the foundational world to pay for the sins of his people. So he, as it were, died. And we don't have time in this study to show it, but you can look up the word sleep and Ephesians 5:14, "Awake thou that sleepest, and rise from the dead." God uses sleep as a figure of death, and so Christ slept. Then the disciples woke him with an urgent cry, "Lord, save us, we perish." And he rose from the sleep to save them, pointing to rising from the dead. And then they're on the other side. And immediately he encounters the man with legion and will cast out the devils into the swine, about 2,000. And they're beseeching him. They besought him that he would suffer them, and they besought him that he would suffer them to enter into them, and he suffered them to go into the swine. But before that, they besought him, verse 31, that he would not command them to go out into the deep. The Greek word translated deep is abysso. Abysso is the word for bottomless pit in the book of Revelation. And we don't have time to look at that right now, but Lord willing, in our next study, we'll pick this up, and you'll see that the deep is a reference to hell, the grave, to death. Command us not to go out into the deep, into the abyss. And then the Lord allows them go into the swine, and the swine go into the deep. They run right off the cliff of the edge of the body of water, and they go down into the water and are choked. Well, you're probably beginning to see the spiritual picture. Why they have to cross over, and once they cross over, then we see the gospel starting to work.
Thank you for joining us for eBible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies and information, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. Until our next Bible study, may the Lord's perfect will be done.